Welcome, everyone. We're very happy to have you with us tonight for our annual members and supporters meeting. We have a lot of things to present to you tonight. We have a well-rounded agenda, starting with Bethany Wall, one of our board members, presenting, we're happy to say, 4 new members of the board. After that, Christina Donnelly will be talking with us about membership, followed by Jenny Meyer, who will talk to us about new and renewed sponsors. And following Jenny, I'll give everyone a project status where we are today with settlement and progress that we're making towards our goals, followed by Annisia, Director of Housing, Economic Development, and Commerce, to talk more about redevelopment plans in progress that will codify, land use, providing open space for the project. After Annisia, we'll have Sean give us a recap of our vision. He'll also be presenting the flyover video that you've probably seen on our website. And following Sean, Peter Delman, just before Sean, we'll do a little question and answer. If Annisia needs to leave, we know she has limited time. We could do a little question and answer after Annisia speaks, then move on to Sean, followed by Peter Delman, who will talk about the fabulous art exhibition called Embankment on My Mind that will begin on November 1st through December 16th this year. Peter will then introduce Katie Liness to talk about botanical art classes. And then we'll wrap up the meeting with some additional question and answers and just saying so long to you all. So with that, I'd like to introduce Bethany Wall.
Thanks, Stephen. So good evening to all of you. I guess you can flip it to the next slide, Sean. So some of you have been coming to these meetings a while, are pretty familiar with the list of folks that you see as existing board members, most of whom have been serving for a number of years. Summer of 2021, so a year and a half ago nearly, we realized that a couple of our board members were going to be stepping down. And so that really began kind of a conversation about how do we build our ranks, continue to develop the board in some new ways. And so those conversations really gained steam later in the year toward December, when we kind of reevaluated, looked at our mission and vision so that we could be sure to communicate it really clearly, and really looked at our own board service and did self-assessments and kind of developed criteria for board members. We really wanted to create a process that was just a little bit more clear and formal and transparent. And so these were kind of steps that we took. After we figured all of this out, identified some of the gaps and needs, we set out to communicate to folks. First, maybe folks who we knew, maybe people who had volunteered with us, who might be interested in board service, began some discussions. We then communicated out further to other folks who have been involved with us through the years, and finally made a full call to our full list of members, describing that we were on the search. And from all of that, we ended up having interviews with a number of interested prospects, and the ones who wanted to continue sort of went further with the process, got a little bit more deeply involved in our work through the period of months through the spring and summer this year. And that has led to invitations to a cohort of 4 new members that we are so excited about and so happy to introduce you to tonight. We think that they expand our knowledge base, our capacity, our ability to do the work for this all volunteer organization. And so instead of me talking about them, I'm going to just mention who they are. and you can just wave if you know. I know we have something else on the screen, but Jessica Constantine, Michael Darling, Austin Sakong, and Ryan Williams are the 4 new members. And so now in reverse alphabetical order, starting with Ryan, we've asked each of them to just give us roughly 25-word description or bio of themselves. So with that, Ryan, have at it.
Thanks, Bethany. Hi, everyone. I'm Ryan Williams. I've been helping with the Embankment website for a few years. I'm excited to be getting more involved. I also do a lot of bike and complete streets advocacy, so I'm very excited for the greenway aspect of the project in particular. So yeah, it's very, very exciting all around. I will pass it to Austin.
Hi, everybody. I'm Austin. I'm an architect and design director at FX Collaborative. I'm an educator at Columbia and NYU. I'm a commissioner on the JCHPC. Hi, Annisia. I'm a bibliophile, a Sondheim fanatic, and a super proud dad of 2. Michael, your turn.
Thanks, Austin. I'd like to say that it's so good to be here with everyone. 25 words or less. Local business professional and strategic relationship manager. Inspired by nature and committed to sustainability. I'm a national park enthusiast, love my green space, family focused, 16-year Jersey City resident, and dessert please. So with that, Jessica, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Michael. I'm Jessica Constantine. I'm a 14-year Jersey City resident. I'm a career educator. I previously owned the Embankment School, which was named after the embankment. I love nature. I'm an avid gardener, an art enthusiast, a foodie, but most importantly, I'm also a mom of 3 school-age children here in Jersey City. And I'm so happy to join the board. So I guess
Wonderful.
Back to Bethany.
Yeah, that was great, you guys. You did a great job, and thank you for doing that. And that's just, the tip of the iceberg for everyone who's here today. So I really look forward to your getting to meet these folks and work with them over time. So I guess with that, Christina, I'll hand it over to you to talk about membership.
Thank you. Thank you. Could you do the next slide, Sean? So this beautiful slide here represents any level of membership that you can become of the Embankment. And we're really grateful through the years to all the individuals that have sponsored us and become a member. And without you, we couldn't have a Zoom because we wouldn't be able to afford it. We wouldn't be able to send the invite through Constant Contact. We've also, in larger ways, used the money for legal fees, for our accountant. So your membership is extremely important to us in how we live and breathe each day, but also as when we apply for grants, they also look to see the number of supporters that we have. And even a small amount like $5 or $10, is another person that we can show is a supporter. And that's very important as we write grants and obtain money. And, I urge you to go to embankment.org and under the section here, become a member. Many of you are members already. I ask you to renew and then get a friend to become a member so that we can keep this village growing and make our dream happen here. I'm going to introduce Jenny, who will talk to us about the sponsorships, the businesses that are our supporters.
Hi, I'm Jenny Meyer, and just kind of in the same vein as, our sponsors are also members and supporters in a way. And we've had some members for almost 20 years, we've also had some incredible supporters who have been with us for decades. And, this first slide just shows, actually most of these people have been with us for decades. Madame Claude Wine and Restaurant, I don't know if you all know, but they have sold their business and they're moving back to France. But there will be a new Madame Claude So everybody needs to go there and tell the new owner they need to also become a sponsor. So when you're going out, let the sponsors know that you're part of the support and that you really appreciate it. And the next slide is just some more. Again, Jersey City Times is new, but we've had Carmine's, Postnet, Delenio, Two Boots, new. These guys all for years. I believe Community Compost is new. And the next slide. And here's just some more boutique realty. Harris Happiness. We've got Dark Pines and Irene Barnaby Group, the Thirsty Quaker, and the Scandi School. So we have a growing group of sponsors, and that's really exciting. So if you know a small business or you go to a small business a lot, advocate and say, hey, you guys sponsor the embankment, because it will bring ecotourism and all of these great things, to the neighborhood. So that's about it for sponsors. So we thank them very much, and we're going to keep on asking new businesses as they come online.
Thank you very much, Jenny. For the next section, I'm going to talk briefly about project status before we ask Annisia to fill us in on the redevelopment plans. So project status, the question on everybody's mind is always, hey, what's happening with the embankment? When are we going to get started? And inevitably, the response is when settlement is reached. And we've reported to you over the last couple of years that our strategy has been, since Conrail walked away from a settlement, now it seems like 3 years ago, we had a strategy to move forward by pursuing our federal remedies at the Surface Transportation Board. Those federal remedies consist of making our case before the STB at different points of their review, appealing decisions that don't go our way, and ultimately, when the STB does finally approve abandonment of the Harsoness branch, possibly filing an OFA in the event that we have not been able to come to terms on settlement. But it seems like everybody wants a settlement. The goals here is to identify what each party wants in the settlement, the parties being the LLCs who purchased the land from Conrail, the developer who wants to develop designated parts of the embankment parcels, and Conrail, of course, who sold the land, and then, of course, the city, Rails to Trails, and the Embankment Preservation Coalition. Everybody needs to identify what they need. We then provide a framework to achieve what each party wants, and it culminates in the transfer of land to the city for the purpose of historic preservation, open space, and rail and trail. The settlement comes down to actionable steps that can be taken. And I believe we've gotten to those steps, and we're in the interest and in good faith of reaching a final settlement. We're actually starting to take the steps required that settlement calls for. And the first step on everybody's list is to create redevelopment plans that provide the open space that is consistent with the vision we've had for the 6th Street embankment, as well as carving out development rights on certain portions of the parcels in order to achieve a compromise. What we have before us and what we've worked on over the year is the 6th Street redevelopment plan and amendments to the Louis Minot's Marin redevelopment plan, which now controls what happens on Block 1. The map before you shows you in green what will be secured as a result of these redevelopment plans. The redevelopment plans take you through and outline how all of these parcels will be used. We're very happy to have achieved this first goal. It has gone before planning and has gotten approved, and it's now making its way to City Council. There are two plans that are going to City Council. One plan that is blocks 2 through 8 that you see before you. The second plan is block 1, which is the Louis Munoz Marin plan. We're told that the Marin plan may be delayed and will be possibly following up. We had thought we would get them both approved together. But, we're controlling what we can control and encouraging others to move along on the parts that they control. And with that, Annisia, if you're still with us and haven't headed for the door, we'll ask you to give us some more details
I'm
on
definitely
the plans.
I was charging a little bit because the charger is behind me anyway. So I turned my camera off so I could spin around. But that was a great preamble, Stephen. Thank you so much. And thank you to the coalition for having me here today to give you this update. So 2022 has been a very busy year for the Embankment Preservation Project. Stephen and Maureen can attest to many, many, many conversations trying to move this project forward. I'll recap a few things that Stephen mentioned as I go through this, but in 2019, there was a term sheet executed by all parties involved. And really since then, the parties have continued to engage in settlement discussions and are in the process of working out the final details of the settlement agreement in the absence of Conrail, as was mentioned previously. That's the main difference between where we were in 2019 and where we are today. While that agreement, which is still being worked on, is pending, as Stephen had mentioned, that agreement and the term sheet lay out a series of items and steps that need to take place. So the city has, in good faith, decided to start moving forward and undertake some of those first steps that are laid out in the agreement to try to get us closer to a final resolution. I mean, that really is the goal. So to go through what some of those are. This past year, there was an area and needs study that was undertaken by the Division of City Planning. And the purpose of that was to declare the embankment parcels. So that's the areas, mostly the areas in green that Stephen mentioned, an area in need of redevelopment. And so just to put that plainly, like why, what were they before? Why would we do that? It puts them in what we call redevelopment. So our city is made up of areas of the city that are zoned. We sometimes use the term straight zoning. There's a zoning district, R1, R2, industrial, open space, whatever it may be, as opposed to different redevelopment plans. So the embankment parcels themselves, with the exception of blocks 1 and 2, were not in redevelopment. They were in straight zoning with a combination of, so I think I wrote down the notes here. So blocks, the particulars, blocks 1 were in the Louis Munoz Marin plan, still is. Block 2 was in a plan called the Grove Street NDP. Blocks 3, 4, 5, 6, and half of 7 were in R1, which is our residential 1 and 2 family zoning district. And the other half of block 7 and block 8 were in our NC district, which is neighborhood commercial, which is a 5 to 6 story mixed use zone. So the goal was to put at least blocks 2 through 8 in one comprehensive plan, which is on the screen. It's called the 6th Street Embankment Plan, with the vision of what that we all have, the coalition, the city has for what would happen with blocks 2 through 8. And we can do that by putting them in one comprehensive plan and not having them in these various zoning districts. And the major thing to mention about that is that it really is a change, because this is part of what is the fundamental to the fight that the coalition has been having all these years. As I mentioned, all those different blocks, as I went through them, blocks 3 through 8 at minimum had zoning on them that could have allowed them to be something else. I mean, the barrier was that the embankment walls themselves and the embankment had local designation, historic designation. So there are barriers to being able to build on it, but from a straight land use aspect, it did not have that barrier. And so that is one of the biggest successes of where we are today, is that we have a plan that now lays out this vision as a parks open space plan for blocks 2 through 8. So the first step taken to do that is an area and needs study. That was done, that was completed. Then the next step was the creation of those redevelopment plans. So block 1, as I mentioned, is the Luis Munoz Marin plan. There was an existing plan. The coalition has worked on this in the past. I don't know the exact year. I'm sure Maureen and Stephen are better versed at when this happened, but there was a deal struck in the past, and that gave a zoning to that block of 400 units of residential and 200 units of hotel in exchange for the embankment parcels. So in where we are today is that no change related to those elements, density, height, bulk, was made. Well, the density and height, we can talk about bulk in a second, but density and height were not made. There's no increase in the bulk made to where the Luis Munoz Marin Boulevard plan was from before. Prior to, I would say, the most recent iteration, and when we were back in 2019 looking at a term sheet, there was this discussion happening with the developer about building 875 units of residential on that block. And that's where we were a few years ago. So in that situation, we were going to change the zoning to accommodate that in exchange for other things that we were getting for that. So things changed in that time period. Time went by, Conrail dropped out. There were, COVID happened. There were lots of things that happened. Time went by. The city had passed an inclusionary zoning ordinance during that time. And it was seen that that ordinance would be triggered by this change, because that ordinance says that if any site gets 5 units or more of residential or 5,000 additional square feet of residential floor area, that the inclusionary zoning ordinance is triggered. And in this location, that would mean 15% on-site affordable housing. The developer had expressed that financially that was not going to work for the project to be able to do that, and had decided they would prefer to move forward with the existing zoning that was in the plan from the prior agreement from the past. So we began to work with this developer to do that. So the plan that's in front of the planning board for the Luis Munoz Marin plan did not need any sort of major change. It needed very minor changes. So there was no change made to density. It's exactly the same, 400 units of residential, 200 units of hotel. There was no change in the heights allowed. The plan, did I make a note here? 35 stories and 45 stories. It had allowed for 2 different towers at those heights. There's been no change to that. The current FAR was allowed at 11.25. No change to that. So the primary changes are, well, and I'll just go back that the zone, anyway, that zoning, even that zoning at in the plan that is existing today, it has not gone through city council, the one that is in effect today, it's contingent upon an executed settlement agreement and the transfer of blocks 2 through 8 to the city. So the changes that happened were urban design standards were put into the plan for the building on block 1 that would allow for a 1 tower configuration. There were substantial support in the rounds of public meetings that were had. There were a series of public meetings, but they were still limited to the same height FAR and units. So there's no additional being given to the developer. They're going to work with the same parameters they had before, the difference being instead of 2 towers, they would combine into 1. The plan also requires a 30-foot long public right-of-way from Marin Boulevard to Manila via a public access easement and a stair from the elevated walkway to grade at Marin Boulevard, so at the Marin side of the block. and a bridge from at the Manila side of the block, from block 1 to block 2, it requires a bridge. It also included an addition of historic preservation standards to block 1 that were not in the plan before. It was very minimal before the way the plan was written. So there was much more put in terms of urban design standards, historic preservation standards. The underlying zoning in the plan, if they were not to have a settlement agreement, was R5 or R4 zoning. So that's the summary of the Luis Munoz Marin plan. And that plan went through planning board recently and is up for vote at the council tomorrow. No, sorry, the other one is up for council tomorrow. It's, as Stephen knows, we're all confused ourselves, but that hopefully will be up for a vote very soon.
Annisia, if I may interrupt you just for a moment.
Yeah.
Sean put up the developer contribution slide for Annisia, just so that people can see what contributions.
So these are the things that I was mentioning. So the 30-foot right of way on block 1, a grand staircase from Marin, the elevator, right, there's a few other items that I didn't mention. The elevator from Marin to the walkway for ADA compliance, the construction of the bridge between across Manila to block 2. There's public bathrooms accessible from the walkway. This easement that has to be transferred, and yeah, as we just mentioned with the elevator, ADA compliant access. So that's all built into this Luis Munoz Marin plan changes. So the other plan, which really follows in the area of need study that was done. So the area need study was done. Yeah, great, thank you.
Sure.
The area need study was done to allow us to create this 6th Street embankment redevelopment plan, which allows us to finally combine blocks 2 through 8 into one plan. The goal is to protect the historic asset and to increase the access to open space. The main thing that the plan did was to establish the permitted use within those blocks as open space, trail, and parks. And light rail, allows light rail. So it removes the ability to develop these blocks, which is very important because that in itself is an enormous step forward from where, for the work that the coalition has been doing from where we were before. There's one exception to this, which is on block 7. There is a little bit complexity in the ownership there. In general, all of the parcels that are added into this plan in blocks 2 through 8 mirror or are exactly the same as the parcels that the LLCs, right? That's the entity that owns, we'll say owns to keep it simple, that owns the embankment parcels currently, that the coalition has been fighting for these years, that we was able to purchase them, not through the proper process. But the idea was that they had to transfer the exact same parcels that the LLC own into the city's hands as to be able to develop block 1. There was a little complication on block 7 where there is ownership by another entity, not the LLCs, that makes the parcel not great for either party. It wasn't great for the right of way. It wasn't great for that party. So there were also, I mean, it gets a little complicated, but there were some a land swap that was done by the LLCs with this owner years ago. So that block has been, will need to be, it says block 7 is subdivided, but will need to be subdivided properly to allow for a development to happen on block 7 by the owner, as well as reinforces and cements the right of way for the embankment open space to pass through and connect between 7th and 8th, block 7 and to block 8. It also is at the full width at one end of the site. So
Annisia, we have a nice slide for you.
Okay.
Here we go.
That's great. So this is a great way to describe it, to show it. So it allows for development where the gray parcel is and allows the green where the green is, that becomes the embankment parcel that's preserved in this plan. We don't have a slide that shows what it looked like before, but it wasn't great. It was 2 slivers and it didn't allow for a good development for them or for the open space. So this full width along Brunswick Street is great. It allows a connection to Block 6, between Block 6 and Block 7. And the plan is very detailed in terms of the design guidelines and how far the setbacks need to be. And on top of that, it does require that that building have 15% on-site affordable housing in that development. So there's a lot of wins from that negotiation. We made the zoning compatible with NC zoning, the neighborhood commercial zoning, which was the zoning anyway for this general area. As I had mentioned before, part of Block 7 and Block 8 had that zoning. That is the zoning in that general area. We're not talking about some large building. We're talking about something in the scale of, I don't know if we agreed on 6. Is it 6
stories? Yes.
Yeah. So it's like 6-story building, 50% on-site affordable housing, and it finally cleans up the title that we need cleaned up so that we could transfer these parcels and they can be in city ownership. So there's a lot of progress on this site as well. Again, just like the other plan, the zoning's contingent upon an executed settlement agreement and the transfer of blocks 2 through 8 to the city, including the subdivisions being completed and executed on both this block as well as a Block 8. There's a little item on Block 8 that relates to Conrail and cleaning up what the LLCs own and what Conrail still owns. All of that is contingent on the ability to develop both this parcel as well as Block 1. All of that has to be cleaned up for everything to be fully executed. The plan also introduced historic preservation standards for the embankment structure itself on blocks 2 through 6. Blocks 7 and 8 only have stanchions. They don't actually have the embankment, the traditional embankment walls. But those and those historic preservation standards are focused on restoring and rehabilitating the existing structure. Blocks 1 through 6 are locally designated as a landmark. And so anything that happens on that, and including actually in block 1, would have to go in front of Historic Preservation Commission. All of this, everything I just went over, was presented in quite a bit of detail by Mallory Clark, who's one of our city planners, at the planning board meeting that took place on October 11th. Excuse me. It's available on YouTube, and all those amendments were brought in front of Historic Preservation Commission and the planning board. They're available on YouTube. Mallory did an amazing job of explaining this very complex project, including very clear and helpful illustrations. We have excerpted just a few of those today with the help of Sean, who put together this great presentation. So I really highly recommend, if you were did not attend or watch that planning board, I highly recommend that you do, because she went into much more detail than I did. And it's a great presentation that even goes into some of the history, and it's really great. And it explains it in wonderful detail. So the process going forward, like where are we now and what's happening? So the redevelopment plan for the 6th Street embankment plan is going for its first reading tomorrow night at City Council. The second reading, which would be next, would be 2 weeks from now. I believe that's November 9th. So the redevelopment plans will be considered by council. The other plan for Block 1 will likely be considered shortly after that, a meeting or two later, hopefully, working out some final details with the developer. And then the next steps, we say like simultaneous or near simultaneous. We don't know exactly some of the order that these will take, but they're all being worked on. There's redevelopment agreements that need to be completed with the JCRA between both Albany's, who is the developer for Block 1, as well as that developer, the owner, the person who owns that land on Block 7. And those need to be executed and completed with the JCRA. We also need to complete those subdivisions that I mentioned before. Those need to be completed, cleared up, so that the land can be transferred cleanly to the city. So there's subdivisions needed on Block 7 and Block 8. Block 8 involves Conrail's cooperation, and on Block 7, we need the cooperation of the parcel owner and the LLCs and the city. Excuse me, I'm getting over a little bit of a cold. Good thing we're on Zoom. And then there's the settlement as well. So we write all these on here, the order that they exactly happen in between those three items, we call them RDAs, the redevelopment agreements, the subdivisions, and the settlement, whichever, they're all going to move forward simultaneously. We'd like them all to happen as quickly as possible. Whichever is ready, it will be able to move forward. There's no specific anything holding up at any one of these from moving forward. Once all of those happen, we have the RDAs signed, we have the subdivisions completed, we have the settlement agreements signed. Then Albanese will be able to move forward with their site plan in front of the planning board. So when we say site plan preliminary and final, we're talking about them moving forward with completing the design of their project, at least the earlier design phases. We're not talking about construction documents here. We're talking about the design phases, bringing them to the planning board and getting their approval. It is very common in redevelopment or in any form of development that land transfer or sale or closing of a land transfer happens after entitlements are achieved. So after someone has their approvals. So at that point, there would be the land transfer and it would be simultaneous. It could happen as literally on the same day. Land transfer of all of the titles, they'd be put in an escrow account, they'd be transferred to the city, as well as there would be dismissals of the lawsuits and relinquishing of the federal remedies. But those would happen like simultaneously. So when everything is, has gone through all of this, at that point, everyone feels confident that there would not be an issue to do that. The coalition members like, Stephen and Maureen, I don't know if they want to go through any of this, but there's also STB abandonment has to happen sometime in there because we do need them to officially abandon the properties. So that has to happen at some point in this as well. That's mostly what I want to cover, but I do want to say that, as you all know, this has been an over 20-year battle to preserve these parcels for public ownership and use. And I really want to thank and acknowledge the amazing persistence of the coalition members to fight for this preservation. I know we've been here before saying we're close, and it takes a lot of patience needed from everyone. We really hope to be able to bring this project to a completion. And I really want to thank the persistent, when I say persistent, like I never met more that word ever in my life, Maureen, Stephen, Sean, all the members, I speak with them most frequently, but I know there's lots of you in the background helping out. And it really, your passion and commitment to this project is really quite overwhelming and something really to appreciate. And I feel really optimistic that we can get there, hopefully within the next few months. And also, for our relationship with Conrail is improving. It's not back to where we'd like it to be. And I say thanks to the mayor for that. And I hope that it gets a little better. I feel like lately things have been getting better with them on some other projects. So I keep being very hopeful that that relationship will get better. Not that we're going to hold this up with holding on for that, but I guess we can be optimistic. And that's all I have.
Thank you so much, Annisia. That was a great presentation. I hope it was clear for everyone that was listening. And if you do have questions, Annisia, how's your time at this point? Are you good?
I can take questions now before I have to run.
Okay, let's put your anyone who wants to ask a question, can you please put your question in the chat if possible, and we'll take a look at it and turn it over to Annisia.
Oh, I see someone question parking. The site does have parking. Oh, I don't have the number in front of me about how many spaces it has. They're allowed to have parking. They want to have parking. The challenge is the site, as you know. So it was very important to the coalition that any base or what would typically be like a podium on a typical development, not go above the embankment walls. So I believe they're able to fit in 2 levels of parking within the embankment walls. Obviously, it's not the entire footprint. They need to have a lobby, mechanical, like service type stuff as well. But they're trying to fit in as much parking as they can in the base. Maybe, I don't know if Maureen or Stephen remember how many parking spots there are, but that is something I'm sure it's probably in the presentation Mallory gave, and if not, we can certainly get you the number.
Any other questions? I don't see anything in the chat, Christina, do you? Christina?
Sorry, I had to unmute myself. I don't see anything in the chat either.
Okay, no questions, anyone?
Oh, someone just said.
Oh, wait, Connor, can anything be done while we wait to help improve the 6th Street side of the embankment? Meaning, I think just the look of it, the aesthetics of it.
Well, I do know that that the current quote owners, as Annisia said, do contract with a service that does clean the embankment blocks on the north side of the embankments. That would be the south side of 6th Street. We can certainly reach out to them and ask them to continue, if they haven't, to do something there. Yeah, and we have not done a cleanup in a while. The Embankment Preservation Coalition does schedule cleanups of the 6th Street embankment, both 6th Street and the cross streets, and the alleyways in the back as well. But if there's specific things you're concerned about, you can email us with those, and we can see if we can be helpful.
So someone asked about the Bed Bath & Beyond site. So that project is moving forward. They haven't come in front of planning board yet. I think it's scheduled
Tonight.
Oh, is it tonight? I was going to say, I think
Mhm.
it's really soon if it's not tonight. And so that project will move forward and creates open space on the 6th Street side. But there's not currently a bridge. They asked about the bridge. There's not currently a bridge funded to go across. For block 1 is designed to be able to accept a bridge, like from a spatial standpoint across, but there's no funding for that bridge at this time. So they're designing it and going to build it with this grand stair. And then we have the open space on the other side of the street, but there's room, and it has been contemplated to be able to accept it in the future if such funding could be identified.
Anyone else? Looks like that's it for now.
Okay, great.
Annisia, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me, and I look forward to continuing working with you all and hopefully solving this very soon.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Have a good night.
You too. Okay, I'll just make a quick note now that Annisia is running on to her next meeting. We're very thankful that she was able to come tonight. Something that she may not have thought to mention was that the plan, the 6th Street redevelopment plan, also includes language and design guidelines that address sustainability, protection of the natural resource, issues that Sean is going to talk about in his recap of our vision. I mean, we're obviously have been promoting a very light touch to the embankment, to not have it include a lot of what is traditional park infrastructure. And I'm going to turn it over to Sean. He's going to talk a little bit about that and how, once the plan and the settlement is done, what our next steps are for actually bringing the vision to fruition. I would add that we're going to be speaking with the Director of Infrastructure, Barker Patel, once the plans are passed, to start introducing our concepts so that that department of the city understands what the goal is. So with that, I'll turn it over to Sean.
Thanks, Stephen. I'm going to start with the video that explains the vision in a short 2 minutes, and then we'll talk about the next steps and the things that we'll be focusing on over the next year.
The embankment is envisioned as part of the East Coast Greenway that connects Florida to Maine, much like the Appalachian Trail. And right now, this coastal trail, it has no path through Jersey City, and the embankment hopes to be the catalyst to make that happen. By assembling 3 separate greenways through Jersey City, the Essex Hudson Greenway, Bergen Arches, and the embankment. Starting with the Essex Hudson Greenway and headed towards New York City, which you see here in the background. This off-roads, rails-to-trails experience brings you through native salt marshes and forests from the Meadowlands. Then you ascend into the Bergen Arches where the trains cut through the Palisades. It's as if you've entered a time warp into a forgotten canyon, a true wilderness, where the city floats above you. And it's here that this off-roads path starts cutting through the densest part of Jersey City, offering green space that is so scarce in the urban context. And it's not a park space, no, it's naturally grown, naturally seeded, not planted at all, a true Palisades experience. Then you pop out of the Bergen Arches with New York City in front of you, and you are hovering over downtown Jersey City, where you can see the historic roots of the infrastructure of the railroad. You enter back into the forest of the Palisades, where you really can start to see nature take back over, that infrastructure of our forgotten past, where you can actually learn about nature and its communication with our community. Then there's the embankment, cutting right through the historic neighborhoods of downtown Jersey City, bringing you to the riverfront of New York City. It's built of stone and earth 30 feet above the city, where natural meadows and forests have reclaimed the ground. It's amazing up there. It really transports you right outside the city, only then to be confronted with the largest, most dense city in the United States, New York City. And we all hope to make our cities more sustainable. Our mission? Well, it's to preserve these meadows and forests and show that out of our industrial past, a new type of ecology can thrive and make our cities healthier places for people to live, while at the same time connecting us with our greater regional environment and living with this natural habitat as actually part of our community.
So big picture, I think one of the things that, I want to talk about a little bit today is how we're going to be moving forward. But before we actually get into that, the redevelopment plan that Annisia and Stephen had just talked about really sets the foundation for connecting our community to this larger community along the East Coast. It really starts us being able to give all of our residents, no matter who they are, connection through rails and trails and access to 15 different states, 450 different cities, and that are along this 3,000-mile long corridor that is for the public. It's a really exciting development that we actually have within city planning move forward with this redevelopment plan. I think the other thing is that the hope is that the 6th Street Embankment redevelopment plan will set the benchmark itself for the Bergen Arches and for the Hudson Greenway to continue this vision forward. And with one movement, usually other things start to kind of fall in place. And I think it's a really, really great achievement that this is moving forward. But it's actually even bigger opportunity than that, because what this does is really kind of puts into perspective what a unique thing that Jersey City has, this embankment. It's naturally seeded. No one planted it. It's not like Central Park. It fully grown on its own, and it's only 6 blocks from City Hall, which is amazing because I don't believe there's any other naturally seeded forest that close to the downtown community in any city across the United States. And in a time where there's a tremendous focus on how forests are an integral part of our fight against climate change, the Infrastructure Reduction Act has in itself earmarked $2.75 billion for preservation and management of these non-federal urban forests. That's a lot of money looking forward about how we actually can make our cities healthier and cleaner places. And I think that, the embankment itself can become the poster child in the US for this new push, this new type of green infrastructure across the nation. And we can actually begin that initiative. And so what we have to do is also balance that with the idea that when you go up there today, it's a transportive experience, as was said in the movie. It's pretty amazing. It takes you right outside the city. You feel as you've been transported right into the deep Palisades wilderness within the ecology that had grown up there. It's a really completely new type of urban park. We don't have wild places in urban fabrics today. And so with the passing of this redevelopment plan, we're at the point to take this vision and really move it forward and really begin to develop with the public, as well as with the city, the conceptual foundation or the conceptual work that brings together this vision and brings it to life. So we're going to begin starting now with this transition in defining the exact nature of this public path that goes through the forest and go through the meadows of the embankment and the programs that are associated with those activities or with this path. And so we're starting to get into actually developing these ideas a little bit more, as well as actually defining the access and safety plans for the embankment. What is appropriate for this new type of park? What is appropriate for the green infrastructure of the future? And it's going to take a lot of work because there's really no precedent to it. There's really no precedent for these emerging types of urban infrastructure. And we know that we can't use the same types of best practices, rules, regulations from previous urban parks because they were actually formatted for sports and recreation, open space in a way that's not natural, not about the environment. So fortunately, the redevelopment plan that we were just discussing sets the foundation, as Stephen talked about. And we worked really closely with Mallory. She was great. She really helped us start to create a new type of redevelopment plan, if you actually read through it, that has much more detail than you would typically find in redevelopment plans to really make sure that we can secure this vision and move it forward. And so we're at the beginning of our early stages, as Stephen mentioned as well, in discussions with the city infrastructural and the city sustainability departments as the next steps past city planning on developing the overall concept for the embankment. And that's only really half of it. There's another half of work that we have to do. We're going to begin to divide into these, or dive, I should say, into these 3 different types of environments that are part of the public path. We're going to have land bridge moments. We're going to have meadows. We're going to have forests. All these environments are very different. And then the details of actually bringing this to conception itself to actually being able to manifest and walk through this path takes a lot of work. So what we're going to do is we're going to actually start beginning to focus on these 3 different environments. So with the forest, one of the things that we've talked about in the past is that the forest is a more passive landscape. But I think what's really kind of interesting about the forest is that this is an opportunity where we really can explore new ways to become light in our human footprint. That the ecological assemblages themselves aren't overly impacted by our development, and we can preserve the density of vegetation that already exists there. Because it's important in order to clean our air, to reduce the urban heat island effect, we have to kind of keep the density that's there. It's good for the wildlife. It's also good for these things that we need in our future green infrastructure. And then once you actually think about how you walk across these surfaces, we're hoping to do most of the surfaces as natural materials. This is just an example because it's more about creating something that you would see in our great national parks than you would see as like an urban concrete sidewalk, right? It's a very different experience. It's something new to the city, and we need to look to these precedents that are across our national park systems themselves. As you kind of move out of the forest areas, which are primarily on blocks 3 through 5, from our research, we know that these blocks themselves are the densest in vegetation. But then you kind of come into these more sunny meadow zones that can be a little bit more active in its recreation on blocks 2 and on blocks 7. And so this area and 6, in these areas, we're talking about, what type of programs and activities could be part of this and how do you actually develop that forward? And taking a look at it, we're really focusing on these spaces being spaces for gathering, right? For interactive programs, offering outdoor classrooms, as we know, really needed in the urban environment and in today's overall environment with the way that people teach. And we're also looking at it as places for environmental art, places for wildlife observation platforms, or simply places just to sit out and socialize with family and friends itself. And then the last piece of the of these three kind of components is the bridges. These bridges are going to be new construction, and they're the things that are going to tie everything together. And so when we think about the land bridges, we're really starting to think about how these bridges want to extend the notion of forest and meadows continuing right over the streets, but at the same time, really allowing enough light down to the streets below to keep everything active and lively and bright. So it's going to be a balancing act. It's going to be a lot of work to kind of figure out what the right path really is for this. But we want to ensure that it continues the corridor and that all things can move across it, plants, animals, insects, as well as members of our community. And I believe that in the end, the idea of taking it from a vision to a concept really has to be on, on solid research. And so, as we talked about last year, we had started to engage in actually figuring out exactly what's along this path, this public corridor. And so we commissioned a drone photography and video. Some of the video you saw today in the video I showed earlier, working with the Meadowlands Environmental Research Institute. And we were able to use this, very high resolution photography to document the entire Harsmith Branch and the embankment. But not only that, we were able to actually document the Bergen Arches and the Hudson Greenway as well, because they are important parts of this corridor in the end. And this year, we've been working with Rutgers University to really start to analyze this photography and to develop much better understanding of the natural habitats that sit there. Because to set a framework for our conceptual design, we really need to know the community that's already there. And so what they're interacting in right now is they're master students that are processing and identifying and cataloging all the different types of ecological assemblages that exist within this greenway. And this will begin to inform us on how to choose the paths we choose that offer the best experience, but also are the healthiest avenues for keeping the ecosystems thriving into the future when humans do enter back into the picture. So we're doing this over the year, and we're hoping to actually have maps to share with you next year about all the different ecological assemblages that are part of that. And this is really important because this is how we better understand how to develop forestry management plans, as well as care for this new type of urban park that's part of our city. But the last thing really is it also informs us about our culture. It inspires art, as we heard from some of our new board members. And there's a lot of different connections that people already have to the embankment. And in the city with many artists, the vision also offers a place for environmental and ephemeral art. Everything from things like Annie Goldsworthy to local artists like Elaine, but to inspire our community. And so one of the things I'm really happy to do today also is to introduce you to Peter Delman, who's going to talk about an art program and exhibition that was put together this year that really focuses on and sets probably the precedent for how we can move art programs forward with the embankment and inspire our community. So with that, Peter, I hand it off to you.
I'm going to tell you about the exhibition that Sean just introduced, The Embankment on My Mind, organized by the Embankment Coalition. And Sean, thanks for that great presentation. I think many of the artists who are participating are exploring and responding to that vision of ecology and conservation. So it's at New Jersey City University and features 43 artists. Each of them created an original work of art. Each spent a whole year planning, thinking about, rethinking, and executing for his one contribution, one piece for each artist. And why all this dedication? Because this is more than a beautiful art show. It's a purposeful art experience for both the creators and the viewers. The artists either already knew the site or did a deep dive into research to make an impactful statement on essential aspects of the project. They were inspired by the history, the struggle to secure the site, our ecological vision, and a vision for the future. In a moment, we'll look at some examples of their art. But first, I want to give you a brief look at the schedule of events. The next, or is that what we have there? Okay. Everyone is invited to the opening reception on Saturday, November 5th, and there will be free parking. And later in the exhibition, which runs from November 1st to December 16th, there will be more events. So see our website for details. Next. One hallmark of this show is the dramatic and exciting contrast between powerful gritty art on one hand and exquisite jewel-like art on the other. On the left, the gritty, Anthony Boone's jagged bricolage of art scraps collected during his years of working on the railroad, ironically for Conrail. On the right, Zoe Karamia's ethereal paper moth, a kind of moth that lives all along the East Coast Greenway. She had metamorphosis in mind as she folded one flat strip of paper into cells, and when joined with others, it becomes a three-dimensional paper moth. Next. This haunting image is of a railroad trestle recently dismantled, seemingly to thwart our proposal to use it as part of the East Coast Greenway. Next. Eileen Ferrara made this piece by applying paper pulp to the embankment wall itself. It is a record of the artist actually laying hands on the embankment stones. Next. The sprawling railroad yards depicted here by Laura Vandermeulen exist today only in faded photographs. Next. In her visionary installation, Kate Dodd asks us to stand within the embankment itself and look up at the network of fungi and roots and the forest above. Next. Paul Chingbor goes international. He compares the embankment to a similar reclaimed industrial site in Germany. This may well be the biggest, grittiest watercolor ever painted. The new Epic Seed Library invites visitors to take home packets of seeds of the gritty, adaptable plants known as weeds. Next. A specific section of the exhibition honors plants of the embankment. Many of them are weeds, and the fauna that rely on them. The emerging broom sedge seen here, well, what you just saw is beautiful, as a beautiful, graceful example. Next. Common milkweed is vital to the support of the monarch butterfly. Next. Chokeberry was used for medicinal purposes by the Lenape Indians and by early European settlers as well. Next. The name of British soldier lichens comes from the resemblance of its fruiting body to the distinctive red coats of colonial soldiers. The lichens can grow where plants cannot. Next. Katie Lanessa's knotweed is a persistent invasive, but it also has beneficial properties. Katie is also offering a class as part of our program, which she will tell you about now.
Hi, everybody. I'm so pleased to be part of this group. I just have to say, and thank you for including me. And I'm going to just give you a brief description of botanical drawing, and then specific the class I'm going to be teaching in conjunction with the Embankment on My Mind exhibition. Botanical drawing is a long tradition of marrying art with science. Before photography was the primary way plants could be identified. But even today, with photography at our fingertips, a good botanical drawing can convey a subject with more clarity than a photograph, as I think you can see in some of those beautiful drawings. To create drawings that have the accuracy and the accurate clarity and details a botanical illustration needs, artists must cultivate a specific skill set. In the 4 classes offered in conjunction with the Embankment on My Mind exhibition, I will teach techniques for how to draw in the tradition of a botanical artist. The classes will cover introduction to drawing materials, basic drawing techniques, including contour drawing, just measuring for scale, measuring, seeing underlying shapes, seeing negative space, foreshortening, Also techniques for creating tone, observation of light on form, colored pencil materials and techniques, color theory, leaf and flower structure, and techniques for creating a sketchbook. So we cover a lot of material. So don't, if you're a beginner, don't get overwhelmed. I've strived to design this class that will focus, so we'll focus on a beginner as well as an experienced artist. There are so many reasons that I love to draw the natural world, reasons that go beyond the need to convey pertinent information about a plant. And the act of drawing allows one to experience the world more richly, to sit and observe the world with a purpose. It is my goal as an instructor to teach my students technical skills, but also to instill in them the importance of quiet observation. The class will consist of 4 virtual classes and 1 on-site critique session. And that final critique session will also include a visit to the Embankment on My Mind exhibition.
So please join us to enjoy the extraordinary exhibition at the reception on Saturday, November 5th. And is there one more slide?
I'll give our audience, who's been so nice to stick with us through the whole evening, another opportunity for question and answer. Does anyone have anything that has come up during the meeting that you'd like to ask about? I'm not mistaken, but what I can do is I'd just like to thank this wonderful board for all the work that they've been doing, that they've done all throughout this year and all throughout the previous years. It's a very great group to work with, and I'm so looking forward to our 4 new members. It gives me hope that our work will continue on long after we're gone, and it's nice to know that there are people who want to carry on our goals and vision, and I'm looking forward to working with all of them and all of you. I think with that, if there is no one else that wants to say something, I think.
Question
I
just
do have a
popped in.
question. I'm sorry, there is a question. What is the coalition's vision for the short area west of block number 8 towards Waldo Avenue?
West of block number 8. Well, you know, that is the area that Conrail was in at the time when they were part of the settlement. They were going to give us an easement through those properties so that we could go behind the cemetery, onward to the river line, rail line, and onward to the Bergen Arches. But when Conrail kind of dropped out, we obviously couldn't count on their easement. Annisia pointed out that those parcels of land are part of the area in need study, and the city is still going to push for, at the point that Conrail no longer needs the property, push for those properties to become open space and be acquired by the city down the line. But at the moment, we don't have control of those parcels. So we can only continue to express our vision for what they should become, and to do whatever we can on the local level to put any type of zoning in place that will protect those areas. I hope that answers the question. Okay, I think we're good.
Thank you, everybody, for joining.
Thank you, guys.
Everyone have a good evening.
Thank you.